All right. Oh, we have more guests. Awesome. This is exciting. We get to have we get to have guests. Welcome everyone. This is your I think the fifth person that I've interviewed from the Untap Your Sales Potential community. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm excited to share you with the world, people who don't know who you are. Do you prefer Carol or Carolina?
Carolina or Caro or Caro,
Oh, okay.
whatever works.
Gato. Okay. Got it. So Carolina is a platinum member with Untap Your Sales Potential, and you've been a member with us for a while. So I'm excited to share some of your success stories, your passion for diversity, inclusion, belonging. I know you mentor a lot of people as well, and you founded the local chapter in Denver as well for Latinas in tech. So we're gonna get into all of that, but yeah, just excited to have you with us and your family's here as well. So that's really cool. So welcome, family.
Yes, thank you so much for the support, everyone on the line. And Davidson, thrilled to have this conversation with you. So thank you so much for the invite.
Yeah, and is Milton also a member of the chapter as well? I see Milton's on.
He's a member of the family as well. So thank you
Oh,
for joining,
so
Tio.
cool. Oh, we already start getting comments. All right. Excited for this. Yeah, that's awesome. So this will be fun. So yeah, you don't have to worry about the live stream portion if people field comments. Oh, if anyone has comments or questions, make sure to post it and then I'll field it. But yeah, this will be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to doing this. LinkedIn is promoting a lot of the live stream, so it's like evergreen content. So if people are searching like even years from now, like your content might come up. So that's the cool thing. So LinkedIn's like doing a push to do more video on the platform. So this will be good.
Awesome. This will be a great one.
Awesome. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background? You know, you've obviously had a lot of success. So in today's episode, I'm sure we'll cover a little bit more about mindset. You know, we imposter syndrome comes up a lot for minorities in tech sales, right? Because when you're meeting with a lot of these executives or decision makers in the C-suite, you know, they don't often look like us. So I'm sure we'll cover some of that as well. And we'll probably cover a bit of like why you decided to join the community and why you decided to take that leap of faith in investing in yourself. And this is a bit different as well, but maybe even how we can quantify our ROI, like return on investment on personal development, because sometimes it does feel a little bit harder to talk about that. But if you're open to that, I think that would be a great goal.
Yeah, I think that sounds amazing.
Oh,
So
we
I
have
can give a quick, oh, we got some more.
yeah, we got some more. Oh, Sarah said yay. And then so yeah, we're getting comments. Sean, welcome as well. Mary, welcome as well. Is that all family as well?
These are some families. My boyfriend, Sarah,
Oh,
joining from Florida, all the way from over there. So thanks so much for the support, Sarah.
awesome.
Oh, I
Oh,
think we gotta mute
oh
some of
yeah,
the other
yeah,
folks
yeah.
really quick.
I'll mute her. Okay. All right. So yeah,
Perfect. I can start with a quick intro if you'd like, Davidson.
yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Perfect. So thanks again so much for the invite. My name is Carolina Chavez. I'm an industry account executive, large enterprise at SAP, and I help support four major clients over there. A big focus area for us is shifting our customers into the cloud. So it's a very exciting time to be in tech sales. Outside of my day job, I also am a leader of the Denver chapter of Latinas in Tech, which is a global nonprofit that has chapters, all across the U.S. We have chapters in London, chapters in Mexico, all across the map, really. And the focus of that organization is to help Latinas break into the tech industry. And once they're in the tech industry, also give them the mentorship, the guidance, and the support that they need, not just to do well, but to thrive once they're there. Um, I don't know if you know this, but out of every 10 Latinas that are in tech, seven of them end up leaving the industry. And a lot of them attribute that to lack of mentorship and lack of support. So, a part of the work that I do in that nonprofit is aiming to change that.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing, right? Because I mean at the end of the day, you know, there is life-changing money that you could make in the roles that we're in. And some of it is just like a lack of representation, right? It's like, growing up, at least my mom does nails for a living. My dad is an Uber driver and he works at, Benihana. And when you grow up and you don't see a lot of people that are in, the highest level of tech sales, you just don't even know that it's an option, right? So like what you're doing, like really mentoring people, taking people under your wing, it's so meaningful. Like beyond the obviously like the really good money and like being able to travel the world and doing all these really cool things. I mean, at the end of the day, you're really impacting and you're leaving a legacy and you're just paving the way for so many people who don't even know that this even exists, right?
It's such an important point to Davidson that by embracing your true authentic self, you may not realize it, but you're helping others also lean into that, right? So I think there was a part at very early in my career where I felt like I might have to, fit a circle into a square, right? And I might have to
Yeah.
adjust the way that I speak about things, or maybe adjust the type of jewelry that I would wear into the work based on,
Mm,
what's appropriate or what's inappropriate. And that's really shifted more so as I've, really gained more confidence in who I am. And I've let go of that belief of thinking I need to speak a certain way or I need to look a certain way in order
mm.
to be successful.
Yeah, it's and it these are things that a lot of people of color have to deal with, and it's like in addition to like I don't know about you, but all the sales jobs that we have more guests. All right. It's gonna be a fun it's gonna
It's
be
a
fun.
party. Yeah.
Oh, we got a comment saying love you, Carolina. So people are showing their love for sure. Um
Thank you.
it's interesting because how do you deal with like I guess you can call it code switching, right? It's a terminology that I would use for this. And you've been an ERG leader and I've been an ERG leader. I feel like sometimes it's job that like I would say sometimes like a lot of sales leaders like they don't necessarily support that. They're like, hey, your job is to sell first and then all the other stuff that you do outside like should come secondary, right? Well, like what are your thoughts on that? I know that's a pretty controversial take, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's such a great question. I've always been really clear on what's important to me with anyone that I've worked for, right? And it is, of course, it's so important to make sure that you're taking care of your day job, right? And that you're hitting your numbers, you're doing what you need to do and focusing on revenue generating activities. And through the sales program that Davidson and I are in, Untap Your Sales Potential, they do such an amazing job at clearing through the noise, right? And at times where in a sales job, it can feel impossible to get everything done on your to-do list. So it's really focusing on, okay, what is a revenue generating activity? How do I prioritize the time throughout the day so that I'm making the most of my business? And then, and not a but and ERG work, community work, nonprofit work is still very important to me. It has always been very important to me. And all of the leaders that I've ever worked for have known that, right? It's been a clear expectation from day one. It has never hindered the ability to do my job. I would say that it makes me stronger at what I do, right? Because I have other things that are on my plate. So when I am dedicating my time, I'm focused, whether it's at my day job or whether it's at the nonprofit or whether it's something else I'm doing, I'm focused on being fully present and intentional in what I'm doing because that's then and only then is when you can give the best of yourself to what you're doing.
Hmm. It goes back to your original point and just showing up authentically and just because I do think like growing up, I remember I I was trying to be more of a chameleon because I'm like, oh, like my people in corporate speak a certain way, so I would tone it down a little bit because I grew up in like a low income housing neighborhood, and so I grew up like speaking a certain way, and then when I got into corporate, like as I moved up the ladder, and like luckily my income increased as well, like I noticed myself like I'm like, oh, I need to act a certain way, but then I realized like I'm like, oh, like why am I trying to be like someone else, right? Instead of like embracing my ethnicity or embracing, where I'm from, right? But there's like a delicate balance between, well, like being a chameleon, I guess, is a valuable skill, but like how much of it are we losing ourselves in order to quote unquote fit in, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I think what's really powerful about these conversations, and even more so the groups that we're in that focus on ERG work or DE&I, is that there's a lot of power in acknowledging how we're feeling, right? Because if we don't talk about it, then you might think, oh, this is all in my head, or I'm just making
Mm,
things up. But when you sit down in a room with other people that, look like you, that come from the same background, and you notice these trends of when we're in an office or when we're faced, in maybe a external or internal meeting, right? There are these trends of things that come up, right? And there's
mm,
power in us speaking about that to sit down and say, hey, how are we going to support each other in embracing who we are? Because that's what we're going to do. We're not going to make ourselves small. We're not going to switch and pivot to something that's unnatural. So, how
mm,
can we help lift each other up?
mm. Yeah, I feel like, man, I feel like just the way you speak and the way you carry yourself, like it's so clear that you've transformed. And it's crazy because I was watching some of your testimonials, and so you've had many testimonials over like the different masterminds, and I'm like, oh wow, like it's interesting to see that. So it sounds like you've had multiple, like many pivotal shifts in a lot of these investments that you've made. Not just with Untap Your Sales Potential, but some of these other communities and investments you've made outside as well, right?
Yeah, it's been so important for me, and it can be really confusing. I don't know if anyone on the line is debating looking into coaching for themselves, but it can be something that it at first is a little bit scary, right? Because it's a good amount of money that you're investing in yourself. And there's certain people that would say, Carolina, why would you spend that type of money? Like, what's wrong with you? But
Mm,
then they see the value in going back to school or getting a master's or doing all these other things that
mm,
may or may not pay off. It really just depends on your particular field and what you're
mm,
studying. And I knew at the point in time where I made that investment that yes, it was scary because there's no 100% guarantee, right? But there's no 100% guarantee to anything in life. Eventually, you
mm,
have to take the leap. But once I made that decision to start investing in myself, I was astonished at how quickly these other things kept coming up, right? I kept getting these opportunities to continue working, continue improving myself, and not just do better at work, but also do better at balancing and managing, both the work and the life. And it really
mm,
carried out into so many more areas in my life. I'm incredibly
mm,
grateful.
mm. Yeah, it sounds like these investments, and especially within minority communities, like I didn't see it as much growing up, right? Like I know the first few times I went to some of these events, like I'm like, oh wow, like this is different. Like like the Vietnamese community, for instance, like I never heard any of this stuff, right? But it's cool because like we get to kind of pave the path and we get to introduce that to a lot of our communities as well. So I've been fortunate enough to bring this work to a lot of my family members, my sister, a lot of my friends. So now I'm like, oh, that's cool. I get to, and I know we had an event. I'm involved with this community called Landmark, which is like pretty big self-development, and we get to. I was part of the first group that did it in Vietnam as well, because of Zoom. Luckily, we were able to give that to folks in other countries as well. And I'm like, wow, this is so cool to be able to share this with others as well.
It is, and it's so important to remember that the world is constantly evolving, right? Especially when we think about sales. So think about how you sold in 2020, right, during the pandemic versus now. It's completely different. Think about
Yeah.
how people sold a decade ago. It's completely different. In
Yeah.
2 years from now, in 1 year, it's going to be different, right, with the advancement of generative AI. So programs like this, I think, are so important because it's not like it was, right, many years ago where you go to school and then you get a job and that's the
Mm,
only path to success, right? And also, it's important to think about continual education. So, what are you doing outside of just, maybe attending a university if you did do that? What are other ways that you're growing and you're learning continuously to make sure that you're advancing in the way that you'd want to?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and welcome, Gabby. I know we just got another guest as well. Um, yeah, I think because some of these are different than the traditional, like, hey, go to college and get your master's, get your doctorates, right? And many people would say, oh, like it's worth it to spend $80,000 on a master or 70,000 on a PhD or something like that. And I think many of us, it's a little bit harder for us to shift that same budget towards like some of the, I guess, like untraditional types of education. So, when I talk to my mom about how much I'm spending on some of these things, she's like, "What?" Like she's just like, "That's crazy," because for people that are fortunate enough that can and make those investments, like for my mom, like that could be like almost half a year of work, how much I've spent in a few years. So for her, it's very scary. But then she sees it and she's like, whoa, like that's so cool. Like your YouTube channel's blowing up and all that. I'm like, yeah, mom, because like all these investments I've made. But it is scary for people that aren't familiar with it or just haven't, aren't really sure if it's worth it, right, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and sometimes I think it's helpful to think about it in the context of um like I've talked to others about this before, right? When you go to see a specialist doctor for an issue you're having, right? You're not just paying them for the 15 minutes or the 30 minutes you
Hmm.
might be speaking to them. You're paying them for the many, many, many years of schooling
Hmm.
and rigorous training that they went to be able to help provide you with a diagnosis and recommendations on how to best live a healthy life for
Hmm.
whatever problem you came to them, right? So
Hmm.
that's how I thought about taking the leap and investing myself in sales coaching because Ian has been to what I think it's like 15 or 16 presidents clubs, something like that,
Yeah.
right? And I knew that the level that I wanted to be at, those were the types of sellers that I wanted that access to. I wanted to be
Hmm.
able to ask for help. So it might not make sense when you're just thinking about it as why would you pay for that for, I don't know, 12 meetings a year? But when you put it into context of, okay, that skill set, that level of experience, that's a level that I want to be at. And I don't want it to
Hmm.
take me the traditional path, right? I don't want to be on the normal path to success that might take,
Hmm.
however many years.
Hmm.
Let's get there as quickly as possible. And let's do that by surrounding ourselves with the people that we want to be and we want to become.
Yeah, I mean, and clearly your career trajectory has skyrocketed, right? So sometimes you know, I'm sure part of it is like you're always self-motivated, right? So some of it it's like, hey, is it innate or is it some of it's probably a combination of everything, right? If we're being honest, right? It's you have the drive, you have the vision, and then, but I'm sure, whether it's reading books, listening to podcasts, having mentors, like being exposed to different leaders, it's probably a combination of everything, right?
It is, and it's important that when you start to feel comfortable, to maybe look around and see, what am I doing to think bigger? Am I surrounding myself with new connections, new people? Do I have new ways to enhance my learning? Right? Because there were certain points in my life where I'm like, okay, I got it. I understand
Mm.
everything. And then I shifted into this group, for example, which is when I acknowledged, okay, I need some help, right? I had gone from my previous job where I was selling to smaller companies. And so it was a big leap for me to go into enterprise selling. And I wanted to do really, really well. And I wanted to, hit certain earnings goals. And I wanted to be able to do this job confidently and happily. And that's what this helped me do. But also by making that investment in myself and by just being around this type of community, it helps inspire me to think bigger about my goals, right? So, if I have a certain earnings goal, that might seem big to me, but relatively, if I talk to Christy or Kelsey or
Mm.
Tanvir, they might say, hey, why aren't you adding at least like to 40% more onto that goal?
Yeah.
Why is your goal so small, right? And they say it with love, right, and with care,
Mm.
and it really helps me up level my way of thinking because of the community that I'm in.
Mm. Yeah, that's brilliant. It's we're often our own worst critic. Like it's universal that people are often the hardest with themselves, right? Like and some of it could be like I think we're always comparing ourselves to others, right? So like when I look at Tanvir's earnings, for instance, I'm like, man, like that's cr like it's hard for me to even comprehend that this year. I'm like, oh, that'll take me a couple years, right? But it's so
No, but why does it need to, right?
yeah,
Why
yeah,
does it
that's
need
true.
to?
Yeah, exactly. And that's great having people like you being able to challenge in a loving way, like, hey, like let's kind of unpack that a little bit more, right? And go there where, I would say our friends, like some of our friends might kind of let us off the hook, right? And kind of believe. So it's just good to be inspired and have people that challenge that think differently than, let's say like the average person. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a really great community, and it's been really amazing to be with people that help lift each other up, and they also challenge the way that I think about my own goals, definitely.
So that's a good question. How did you make the leap of how did you have the confidence to be able to land an enterprise sales role when you were selling more smaller deals, right? Because that in itself, you would argue is probably where most people wouldn't even apply to that role, or wouldn't they would be afraid of even taking that, or even interviewing or applying to that role.
Yeah, so it was a really interesting process. So I had originally applied for the academy program at SAP, which is I think it's a 9 or 10 month program. And then when you after you graduate from that program, then you get matched with a mid-market or a large enterprise role. So originally that was the position that I was interviewing for because on paper that was the only position that I was qualified to apply for. I was fortunate enough that throughout my interview process, the RVP that I still report to this day was one of the hosts in my room. So he was watching in the Zoom breakout rooms how we were doing. It was a really interesting dynamic to, be interviewing with a group of others that were going for the same spot. It was honestly a lot of fun in terms of an interview process for me. So um, throughout that, we were having conversations, and past the initial phases, um, I felt that I would be able to take on the full time role. And I was hoping that they would also see that too, because it gave me a preview of what the job is going to be like. So I'd reached out to the recruiter after that interview and I said, hey, I really feel like I'd be a great fit for the full time. I would prefer to bypass the academy. What do you think about that? So she socialized that with them, and they had agreed, right? We had some conversations about it afterwards.
Hmm.
And you made a really good point about a lot of people wouldn't put their name out there. And right before this call, I just got off the phone with someone who is wonderfully qualified to apply for a role here and has been holding back from doing so
Hmm.
because they're not sure and they were very fearful on their skill set. But I think, especially in sales, it's all about your ability to connect the dots and tell a story, right? Because when we sell things, no one, I don't care how smart you are, no one knows all of the details, all of the ins and outs. But what you can do is connect the dots to what problems they're trying to solve. And that's what I did
Hmm.
throughout that interview process. And I'm very grateful for the hiring team to have also aligned with me on that and to, help me start an enterprise.
Hmm. Oh man, so many questions. This is great. This is so much gold and so valuable for so many people. So and quick tangent, but I'll connect the dots like afterwards, I promise. So you are a helper on the Enneagram, right?
That was my second place. So,
Um,
but it was very close. So that's why Ian calls that out. So my Enneagram is the type one reformer. And then second place, tied for second place was both helper and challenger.
Oh, okay, okay, that makes more
Hmm.
sense now. I'm like, because I sense a decent, a healthy challenger in you. So I'm like, it seems like
Yep.
you have a bit of both, right? Where you're serving, obviously, but then you're also not afraid to challenge the status quo. So it's a good, healthy balance, what I'm sensing. Okay, that makes more sense now. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think this is very prevalent with people of color, right? To like especially the much higher like roles where let's say the on target earnings is 300K and above, right? I notice a lot of qualified folks that are people of color, they wouldn't even bother even applying. They're just like, no, like I wouldn't be able to get it, you know? So and it's something that because I've coached probably at least like 60 people that are, Vietnamese or Asian. And I'm always like, you should apply for that role. Like, and they're just like, they're like, no, I'm an SDR. Like, how do I can't just make the jump to AE. I'm like, yeah, you can do it. Like, I was able to, without having enterprise AE experience, I was able to get a role that was enterprise AE. And same thing when I was mid-market, I was like, oh, I don't have that, but I got that, right? So it's like one of those things that you just have to believe in yourself. And sometimes it just takes a mentor just, saying like, hey, like, you're totally qualified. Just go for it, you know?
Yeah, and I think it does stem down to what your view is on worthiness and your self-worth too, right? And maybe those individuals are faced with imposter syndrome or they feel like they're not good enough. There was something that stood out to me at one of the masterminds that Ian had hosted, and one of the speakers had an exercise where they would go through problems, right, or challenges that we were having, and these assumptions of there's no way I can hit my quota because I have, an all net new patch and it's
Mhm.
impossible. It's difficult. Nobody that had this patch in the last 3 years has hit quota. And throughout this exercise, the question you had to ask yourself is this true? Yes or no? And then you have to ask yourself follow up. Can I say with 100% certainty that this is true? And it's a trick because nothing is ever
Mhm.
100% true, right? When we're talking about these things.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of times we can act as unintentional blockers to ourselves and our own self growth. So I would challenge those that feel like, hey, maybe I can't apply for this job because I don't have the requirements. I don't check all of the boxes. And if they really do feel that way, maybe just take an uncomfortable step. And if they're not ready to hit apply, go look at that company and see and look for people that have similar backgrounds to them, that have worked with similar companies in the past, that maybe went to the same school as them. Try to find some mutual connections and ask them for a coffee chat and socialize and say, hey, I'm thinking about applying for this role. What are some tips that you have? And that might make it seem a little less big, but don't do nothing, because that's the worst thing that you can do for yourself is just to sit there and think
Mhm.
that you're not good enough and not take
Mhm.
that leap and not try.
Yeah, you're presencing me to the power of mentorship and the power of just like putting yourself out there and just going for it, right? Even if someone doesn't respond back to you or maybe they're busy and they want to talk to you a month later, like don't forget to follow up, right? Like that one conversation could literally change your life. Like just get your foot in the door at all these amazing companies that we've worked for, right? And the people that you'll meet and just it's and just the like growing up, because I grew up pretty poor, like it was hard for me to fathom like, oh, like I'm gonna travel to the world and go to Fiji or do all these cool things. And it was just not even part of my like I couldn't even imagine it. So it's just crazy to think like how much can change in like a relatively short amount of time too. Right.
It can, yeah, it can if you allow it to, right? Because people have these ideas in their head of, it's going to take this amount of time, or I'm going to have to go through all of these steps. But if you think about all the things, like things that were done that were great, right? Nothing was ever really done that was a great leap in like a safe or practical way. So I try to get away from those smart goals, those practical goals, and maybe double or triple what I want to do, right? Set a really big goal for yourself and then focus on how that would make you feel and then bring those aspects and that feelings into who you are today, right? And
Mm.
that helps make it feel less big. It helps make it feel more attached and aligned to who you are.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, it's clear that you're also applying the lessons from sounds like Elise Archer's community as well, right? You can tell,
Yes, yes.
yeah, there's a bit of ease in a lot of your way of being, and that's cool. I mean, was that scary for you to invest in that community as well, or did you just have like the belief and the and you know that oh, ultimately this is worth the investment?
Yeah, I mean, at the time that I invested, I wouldn't say that it was scary. So I had originally invested in Ian's program and Untap Your Sales Potential, and I've been a member for almost 2 years now, right? So I've invested twice there. And then I met Elise Archer through one of Ian's masterminds, and she focuses on, balancing masculine and feminine energy specific to sales. She focused on a lot of deeper and inner work. So I felt like that was such a great balance to have these two programs at the same time.
Yeah.
And I also was running into some bad cycles with myself, right? That I had been working with, and I still work with both Ian and then, through some members of Elisa's program too to help supplement it. Of how do I make sure that I'm not getting heavily burnt out and, still manage my business and be successful with my day-to-day job.
Hmm. Yeah. I think what's more important is that you're actively applying a lot of the lessons, like you're because a lot of people, and I've been guilty of this as well. Like we conceptualize things and we read it, but there's a difference between reading it and then internalizing it and like actually shifting our way of being, right? And it's clear that you're actively applying everything, and I think that takes courage, that takes vulnerability, and really it takes like discipline, right? I mean, everyone from the outside is probably like, oh wow, like she has it all. Maybe she's just naturally gifted or whatever, right? But I'm sure when you really look, when you actually see what the day to day is, like most people probably wouldn't make the sacrifices that you've had, right?
It helps too, the level of investment, right, that you make, right? Because if you're putting your own dollars into it, you're going to hold yourself accountable, right? So I've
Mm.
had people reach out and like try to compare different kinds of coaching programs, right? And someone might say, oh, this one is a lot cheaper,
Mm.
but it, doesn't offer all these other things. And I'll say, yeah, but how hard are you going to work
Mm.
to to basically get the value out of that one versus if you were to make a larger investment that does provide greater benefits and you've seen them, right? So it's easy for
Mm.
us to pay for something, and if it's small enough to say, oh, I just forgot about it, or have work pay for it, and then you don't really have any skin in the game.
Mm.
So that's a good piece. And then also the timing around it too, and acknowledging, okay, this is a commitment I'm making to myself for at minimum 12 months,
Mm.
right? So it's a large investment. I need to make the most of those 12 months, right? And I need to stay on top of things. So that's also
Mm.
another element that helps with these different programs.
Yeah, I like your analogies. Like when you said that with higher education, like that, and the doctor, the specialist one was really good. How would you describe, like, what's a good analogy for going through something like this? Because sometimes it's hard for me to articulate some of it to my friends that aren't as into this type of stuff as I am.
Yeah, I think, and I'm also stealing this from another speaker, right? So um there was a talk I was on recently where they talk about the turning point, right? And in a lot of professional sellers' careers, there's a point where they might hit their head against the wall and say they need something new. For some people, it comes after years of not hitting quota, or maybe unfortunately being laid off or let go because of poor performance. For other people, it might be more on the gain side of, really wanting a bigger house, or wanting to provide more for their family, or, wanting something, but acknowledging that that thing seems far away, that goal seems far away. So there's different turning points for different people. Um, but I think it all stems from feeling like what they really truly want is too far. That's what I've noticed is the consistent trend from those that are in pain state or those that are in gain state. They feel that what their ultimate goal at the time, right, because it's ever changing, is something that's so far removed or so far away
Mm.
from them. And that's generally when they make that type of investment because you also have to be aligned enough to not be in your ego and to not think I can figure everything out on myself or like by myself, I don't need anybody else. And you have to acknowledge that there's power in working with others and in learning from others. Like, why go through all of these mistakes myself if
Mm.
I can learn from someone who's been doing this
Huh.
for 15, 20 years, right? And I'm sure they've made a ton of mistakes along the way, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the big trend that I see is that turning point normally happens when your goals feel very, very far.
Yeah, I love what you just said because a a lot of people, yeah, it's like sometimes we hit rock bottom and then we're like, okay, we need to change, right? A lot of us, it's like, for me, like I'm like, oh man, I'm gaining a lot of weight, or it's like my wife will poke my stomach and be like, hey, you're getting a little pudgy here, I'm like, oh crap, and then I'm like, all right, CrossFit, like 5 days a week, like let's go. But it sounds like you are able to think ahead and you're kind of planning, you're like, well, instead of me having to wait, like, why don't I just like proactively take the steps, right? And maybe I can learn from and shortcut it maybe a couple years or a few years because it's like you'll get there eventually, right? Like you're obviously naturally motivated, you're disciplined, and you have a very strong community, like you know how to leverage your relationships. But it's like maybe instead of getting, making 600K in 3 years, like it's like, oh, well, I can just learn from the best and then I'll get there in 1.5 years, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's those individuals that are in the room that are seven-figure earners, right? That are challenging the way that you think about running your business and sitting next to people. There was someone at the mastermind where he had closed, I think, like 25 million in ACV last year. And I mean, that's amazing, right? Not everyone there could say that, but there are some that could. And it's really inspiring to be around people and reminding yourself, oh, hey, they're people, they're regular people too,
Mm.
right? It's not so far removed to
Yeah.
be able to think that I also could and will accomplish something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to acknowledge that everyone is at different stages in their life, and some people are really good at this one thing. So, like, let's say, this person in this untapped your sales potential community is making a lot of money, but one of the things that they want, they're like, wow, like Carolina has so many followers and on LinkedIn, and she has a really strong brand. It's like, oh, I wish I was like even close to that, like a fraction of that, right? So I do think it's important to acknowledge that we all are great at certain things, and instead of maybe jealousy or instead of like anger or envy, it's like, hey, why don't I just, to your point, like have humility and just reach out and just be curious and just learn instead of be like, oh, I can never do that, or even lie to ourselves and be like, oh, I don't care about that. But in reality, like we do want some of that, right? I think that requires a bit of self-awareness and some humility as well.
Definitely. And normally, when we feel those emotions of jealousy or anger, or if something triggers us, it's teaching us a lesson. Especially with jealousy, it's just shining a light normally to things that maybe we don't have that we want, or situations that, where others might be more privileged or grow up in a different situation, you might, yeah, have a negative emotion towards them because that's just
Mm.
showing you maybe what you want, right? And when we're able to sit with that and just acknowledge these negative emotions, and say, okay, now what am I going to do to change that? Right? What action am I going to take so that I'm not just sitting here mad, continuing to do the same things that are only going to progress me at a certain rate, right?
Mm. Yeah, it's so cool to see you actively apply all these lessons, right? Because some people, and speaking for myself as well, right? I don't want to put everyone in a box. Like sometimes I have to hear it enough times and then eventually it smacks me over the head. I'm like, oh, okay, like got it. But it sounds like you're very receptive and you're able to course correct much sooner than most people. Sean. Oh, thanks, Sean. That's funny.
Um, I don't know if I can say to most people. I think that just in general, when we're ready to make a change, we'll make a change, right? And sometimes
Yeah.
it does take a few times to hear a certain practice or teaching for it to be able to resonate. But I think that when we're ready, that's when we're able to receive, right? And even at different phases in your life, right? There's reasons why you might reread certain books, right? Like I read The Alchemist 3 times because at different phases in my life, it's meant something different to me, right? And that's not anything negative on who I was when I read the book the first time, or the second time, or the most recent time. And when I read it for a fourth time, I'm gonna have a new perspective. So I think it's important not to be like too hard on yourself if you feel like you've had a certain lesson come up, over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And maybe just remember to approach it with gratitude and say, hey, universe, thanks so much for, tapping me over the shoulder again, or maybe, flicking me in the forehead and reminding me that I need to prioritize this. I'm really grateful for that, tap on the shoulder. And this is a great reminder to focus on what's important.
Yeah. Yeah, the amount of grace that you have and that you're embodying and just being able to also apply the feminine energy as well. It's a great integration that you're modeling and you're really applying the lessons from all these mentors. It's beautiful to see to witness, honestly.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah, well, I could talk to you for hours, but I also want to be respectful of your time as well. Does anyone have any questions, either through the live stream or the posse that we have on the Zoom as well? If anyone wants to say any parting words, we'd love to hear from you all. Okay. Uh, well, yeah, thank you so much, Carolina. I want to, oh, top three books. There you go. What are your top three book recommendations? Thank you, Sean.
Well, I did mention The Alchemist, so that's one that I've read the most times, I think, 3 times. It's an amazing book, and I think it's really great to read it at different phases of your life because I think you get something new from it every time. I don't know if I could say like the top 3 books of all time. That's definitely my top one, right? But I can share some other books that I'm reading right now or that I've been listening to. So, Think and Grow Rich has been a really, really great one that I'm starting. The Power of Now has been really amazing. So I'm leaning into more of those like mindfulness books.
Mm.
Um, those are the ones that I'm working through now. And then the book of mental toughness mantras. That one has been so great. I've loved listening to that on audiobook, and
Huh.
I'll listen to like a chapter each day because they're pretty short. And it's just a really good reminder to help keep yourself balanced and to also have gratitude for each day.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll post that as well in the comments for folks that want to check out those books. Um, you would probably like the power of thinking big. Have you heard of that one?
I have not, but I'll have to add it to the long list. It keeps growing.
Yeah, it's similar to Think and Grow Rich. I would say it's like on that. Okay, The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz. That's a good one.
Perfect. I'll add it to the list.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Any other questions, anyone? Nice. Okay, well, thank you so much, Carolina. I want to acknowledge you for being such an amazing, an exemplary example of what can happen when you actively apply and commit to the process of all the lessons from the Untap Your Sales Potential and just and also being open to like exploring other types of just different things that might be different, but you're so open to learning and your commitment to yourself and giving back to the community, mentorship, and just showing up powerfully, showing up authentically. It's really inspiring to see you continue to, and I'm sure you're gonna impact so many lives through not only through many other podcasts and all the things that you do for the community as well. Appreciate it.
Well, Davidson, thank you so much for the invite for being here. I always love catching up with you, and it's always a great conversation. And also wanted to say thank you so much to my family on the line, my boyfriend. Thank you for joining, peers, friends, and connections across the board. Thank you all so much for tuning in and supporting.
Oh, appreciate it. Okay. Cool. We got a decent amount on the live stream as well, actually. Once, yeah, well, I'll give you more metrics once that's done, or yeah, once because it'll take some time.